Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the next question from institutional investors. The first question is, proponents of alternative grid storage technologies claim that lithium-ion is unsuited for long-term storage at scale due to vampire drain. Could 4680 cells address this limitation? Is the limitation even relevant for charging the energy equation?
Yeah, just let me jump in on the vampire drain. That's definitely not the issue. A good lithium-ion cell self-discharges less than 0.001% of its energy per day. So it has, this vampire drain is maybe a non-sequitur.
A myth. No. As mythical as vampires.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the challenge with seasonal storage is your value proposition drops from hundreds of useful full cycles per year to less than maybe 10 or maybe even less than 5 cycles per year. So it's just a different type of technology, altogether that would make sense, given that it's more than an order of magnitude different use case.
I mean, we've got a long way to go before we're dealing with seasonal technology issues. But certainly a way to deal with seasonal technology would be to have wind and solar occurring on the side of more southerly latitudes, and but then across a variety of longitudes. So essentially, like let's say in the U.S., for example, if there was, I'm not sure if you'll understand this, that you can actually power the entire United States with just sort of roughly a 100-mile grid of solar. Sometimes people don't quite understand, like, well, how much solar is needed to power the United States? Almost nothing. The United States required to power the United States, and this is true of almost any country in the world. The solar incidence is a gigawatt per square kilometer. This is insane. In fact, if you took the clear area, just the area, for nuclear power plants, the area that is considered not usable because a nuclear power plant is there, in most cases, if you just put solar there, it would generate more power than the nuclear power plant. This is because they typically have pretty wide clear areas. So and if you have, say, 25% efficient solar panels, and then those are 80% efficient in how they're laid out, you're going to do about 200 megawatts per square kilometer. Therefore, 5 square kilometers is a gigawatt, which might be a typical sort of power plant. It's really not much area at all, and a lot of places can have wind and solar in the same place. Anyway, it's entirely possible to power all of Earth with a small percentage of Earth's area, and then to transmit that power through high voltage DC lines. No new technology. You don't need room temperature superconductors. This is also another myth. Room temperature superconductors, almost irrelevant in my opinion. Almost irrelevant. Low cost, long distance power lines using copper or aluminum, that's very important. So heating is I squared R. So that's current squared times resistance. So as you increase voltage, you can drop the current dramatically and drop the heating dramatically to the point where it is of minor relevance. Like maybe you lose 5 to 7% with a high voltage DC power line, something like that. I want to be clear. No physics is necessary. No new materials is necessary. We just need to scale this thing up. The technologies exist today to solve renewable energy. And sometimes people say, well, why don't we do it? That's because the energy basis of the Earth is gigantic, super mega insanely gigantic. So you can't just go and do a zillion terawatts overnight. You've got to build the production capacity for the cells, for the battery cells, for the solar cells. You've got to put that into vehicles. You've got to put that into stationary storage packs. You've got to put that into solar panels and solar glass roofs. And you've got to deploy all this stuff. But it is certainly the case that we can accelerate, and we should try to accelerate it. The right thing to do, I think, from an economic standpoint, and I think almost any economist would agree, is to have a carbon tax, just as we have a tax on cigarettes and alcohol, which we think are more likely to be bad than good, and we tend to tax fruit and vegetables less. The same should be true. We should tax energy that we think is probably bad, support energy we think is probably good, just like cigarettes and alcohol versus fruits and vegetables. It's just common sense. And, but I guess on the plus side, I'm not suggesting anyone be complacent, but sustainable energy, renewable energy will be solved. It is being solved, but it matters how fast we solve it. And if we solve it faster, that's better for the world.
Thank you very much.
There's no question in my mind whatsoever that the energy storage problem can be solved with lithium-ion batteries. Zero. I want to be clear. Zero. I think the bias will tend to be towards iron-based lithium-ion cells. When people say lithium-ion, people think lithium must be a big constituent of the cells. It's more like 1 to 2% of the cell is lithium. The main part of the cell is the cathode. The main mass and cost in the cell is the cathode. For high-energy cells, like for example, what we use in most Teslas have nickel-based lithium-ion cells, which have higher energy density, longer range than iron-based cells. However, stationary storage, the energy density is not as important because it's just sitting on the ground. And so I think the vast majority of stationary storage will be iron-based lithium-ion cells with an iron phosphate cathode, technically. But I think the phosphate part is unnecessary. It's really just iron or nickel. Unnecessary in the terminology. Just think of it as iron or nickel. And there's an insane amount of iron in the world. More iron than we could possibly use. And there's also more lithium than we could possibly use. Basically, there is no shortage of anything whatsoever in iron phosphate lithium-ion cells.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the next question from institutional investors, which is, you've suggested that between a 5x to 10x improvement is achievable in the automotive production versus the first Model 3 line on the first principles physics analysis. Where does Berlin sit relative to that limit?
Oh, I think we're still quite far away from it. I mean, the thing to bear in mind with production is, for those who've never done production, they just don't understand how insanely hard production is. I want to really be very, very emphatic here. Prototypes are trivial. They're child's play. Production is hard. It is very hard. Now you say production at large scale with high reliability and low cost, insanely difficult. But what Tesla achieved on the automotive side was not to create an electric car. The truly profound thing on the car side is that Tesla was the first American car company to achieve volume production of a car in 100 years and not go bankrupt. So I basically, myself and many others at Tesla had to basically have several aneurysms to get this done. It was so hard. You have no idea. Anyway, and the thing about making a large, complex manufactured object is, let's say you have first order approximation 10,000 unique items. If even one of those items is slow, that sets your weight. Just one. Doesn't matter how it can be so trivial. We've had production stop because of carpet in the trunk. We had production stop because of a USB cable. At one point for the Model S, we literally raided every electronics store in the Bay Area. For a few days there, nobody could buy a USB cable in the Bay Area because we went and bought them all to put them in the car. Literally. And there's like hundreds of stories like that. So anyway, that's solving those constraints and a logistics problem that makes World War II look trivial. I'm not kidding. Like, the scale is insane. You know, we're talking millions of cars, massive global supply chain, 50 countries, dozens of regulatory regimes. It's insane.
Thank you. And the last question from institutional investor is, Master Plan Part 2 talks about an urban transport vehicle that is smaller than traditional bus with greater aerial density achieved by removing the central aisle. Do you have any updates to share on this goal?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's move to analyst Q&A.
Thank you. First question is from Pierre Ferragu with New Street Research. Your line is open.
Hi, guys. Thanks a lot for taking my question. I'd love to get actually an update on what you presented on the battery day. In the last 6-7 months, I was wondering how much progress you've made on that front. First, in terms of process development, so how are things coming together on your pilot line? Are you getting to the kind of production throughput you were aiming for? And second, actually on your production ramp, so I was wondering in which sites you're ramping production capacity for the 4680 cell and where you stand on ramping up that capacity as well. And I'll have a quick follow-up on energy as well, if that's possible.
So we have the, and Drew, closely add to this, but we have a small sort of pilot plant, which is still big by normal standards, expected to have like a 10 gigawatt hour per year capability in Fremont, California. And we've made quite a few cells. We're not quite yet at the point where we think the cells are reliable enough to be shipped in cars, but we're getting close to that point. And then we've already ordered most of the equipment for battery production in Berlin, and then much of it for Austin as well. So we're really down to like the nitty-gritty elements. But overall, I think we still feel quite optimistic about achieving volume production of the 4680 next year.
Yeah,
thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Just one thing I would add is there's been a lot of questions about yields. Actually, I noticed people asking about that, and the yield progress has been really strong every day. When we were really still in commissioning phase with most of the tools, to the point where we're confident that the yield trajectory aligns with our internal cost projections. We did talk about yield also at Battery Day, which is one of the reasons why it's useful to check in on that. It takes a while, as Elon just mentioned, to go from prototype to production, and it's not just parts, it's processes, it's equipment. But as we've matured those pieces of the process equipment, we've gotten to where we need to be on the yield side.
Yeah, and basically, this is just a guess because we don't know for sure, but it appears as though we're about 12, probably not more than 18 months away from volume production of the 4680. Now, at the same time, we are actually trying to have our cell supply partners ramp up their supply as much as possible. So this is not something that is to the exclusion of suppliers. It is in conjunction with suppliers. So
yeah.
we want to be super clear about that. This is not about replacing suppliers. It is about supplementing the suppliers. And we have a very strong partnership with CATL, with Panasonic, and LG. And our request to our strategic partners for cell supply is please supply us with as much as you possibly can. Provided the price is affordable, we will buy everything that they can make.
Yeah, and specific to that, we're on track to more than double the supplier capacity over the next 13.
Yeah, exactly. We do expect from suppliers willing to receive double the cell output next year versus this year.
Okay. And I had a quick follow-up on maybe, Zach, for you on your energy business. So I understand like the negative gross margin with solar roof RAM, but I was wondering, what do gross margin look like there when you look at the storage business, and what's your ambition in terms of gross margin in that business? As I guess it's going to grow in the mix in coming years. So it's important for long-term modeling.
We're aiming for comparable margins in storage as in vehicle, but it is important to bear in mind that vehicle is more mature than the storage. So we already are at good margins with the Powerwall, but some additional work is needed for the Megapack to achieve good margins. Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, sorry, just jumping in, Elon. Absolutely agree. Yeah, Powerwall is mature. We've been producing Powerwall 2 for 3 years now, and we're at good margins there. But Megapack has more room to go to achieve our targets.
So we have a clear runway for improving the cost per the megawatt hour of the Megapack.
Absolutely, yes, we do.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question, please.
From Rod Lackey with Wolfe Research. Please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I was hoping maybe just first you could talk a little bit about how you're thinking about the rollout of version 9 of FSD and the transition to the subscription model. It sounds like some of this is about to roll out next month. I'm not sure if that's the subscription model, but maybe you could just spend a little time talking about how impactful you expect that to be.
Yeah, we're working on getting FSD subscription out. There's a couple of internal technical dependencies, but from a business model perspective, that's aligned, and we're hoping to roll that out soon. The key thing that I say here, there's a lot of potential for recurring revenue based on an FSD subscription. If you look at the size of our fleet and you look at the number of customers who did not purchase FSD up front or on a lease and maybe want to experiment with FSD, this is a great option for them. one of the things we'll need to keep an eye on is a potential transition from cash purchases of FSD subscription over to, or cash purchases of FSD who may move over to FSD subscription. And so there could be a period of time in which, cash reduces in the near term, and then as the portfolio of subscription customers builds up, then that becomes a pretty strong business for us over time. But we're hoping to get this launched pretty soon and see what the response is to it.
Okay, great. And was hoping, Zach, maybe you could just talk a little bit about OpEx. There was a noticeable increase, even excluding SBC. Obviously a lot going on this quarter, but can you maybe just talk a little bit about how we should be thinking about that going forward?
Sure. On the R&D side, what we're seeing, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, is kind of a convergence of a series of programs that are happening. And our R&D OpEx spend kind of correlates to where we are in the product life cycle on different programs. And so we're kind of at the tail end of investments in what we call internally Palladium, which is the new Model S and Model X. And so we expect that to decrease over time, but it was high in Q1 for a lot of the reasons that Elon had mentioned. We're also getting very heavy into 4680 development that Drew and team are working on, and the associated structural battery pack that goes along with that. And so these are new technologies, not only new to Tesla, but new to the industry. And so we're investing heavily there on an R&D side to work out those kinks. And, spend along in those areas, should continue over time as we continue to work through the development cycle of those. And then I also mentioned, Elon talked a bit about, Dojo and the potential there. So from neural net investments and custom silicon investments, these continue to be areas that we spend on and make investments in. On the SG&A side, the business is pivoting very quickly to be global, and China is ramping quite quickly, and we're trying to make sure that we are staying ahead of the volume so that we have the right sales capacity, store capacity there, local investments in IT and others to manage the growth, such that as the growth comes, the execution challenges are smaller than maybe in similar periods of growth that we've seen in the past. And so we're making investments there ahead of the growth. And overall, as we look at OpEx as a percentage of revenue over the course of the year, we do expect to see a substantial drop from 2020 to 2021 as the volumes in the latter part of the year pick up.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question, please.
Thank you. From Dan Levy with Credit Suisse, your line is open.
Hi. Good evening. Thanks. Two questions. One is on COGS. I think we've gotten from Battery Day a pretty good feel about the potential for COGS reduction related to powertrain, but I'd like to get a sense of the path to reducing COGS ex powertrain, as you'd still need a meaningful reduction on that front to make the math work on a $25,000 vehicle. So what levers do you have to reducing your cost ex powertrain? Is it just more scale, better supplier pricing, or is it just based on ongoing cost reductions?
Sure. I think all of the above.
Yeah, on the vehicle side, there's plenty of opportunity as well. Obviously, building a car like a Model S is quite complex and has various moving parts. Model 3 and Model Y were steps of improvement in that. But when you look at some of the other advancements that we're including in the Model Y factories into Austin and Berlin, we've reduced the body part count by as much as 60%, and the part costs money. So we continue to find optimizations there, as well as we get economies of scale when we start to talk about the volumes we're considering worldwide with 4 factories building the same vehicle. So both of those things on the vehicle side will improve our COGS as well, and the powertrain continues to be integrated into that.
Great. And then just related, as we see Berlin and Austin ramp, I'd like to just get a sense on the comparison of Fremont versus the new capacity. Obviously, Fremont non-optimized because you bought, the old NUMMI facility. You had to retrofit that to your needs. So maybe you can give us a sense of how your new capacity is going to differ versus Fremont. What are the areas that you have efficiencies that you previously didn't have, and maybe, how much does that add up to improved COGS over time to help you achieve that $25,000 vehicle?
Yeah, I don't think we don't want to talk too much about future product development the earnings calls are not the right place for to make major product announcements. We'll get there, but we'll talk about it later.
All right. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for dialing in and for listening, and we'll speak to you again in about 3 months. Thank you.